Listen carefully. This is not a channel for the weak, the fragile, or the ones still begging for approval. This is for the few who are ready to burn excuses, crush weakness, and build themselves into something untouchable. If you're tired of being average, hit subscribe now, because every second you stay the same, someone stronger is taking your place. They marked you as prey the moment you walked into the room. You could feel it in their eyes, the way they laughed too quickly, the way they whispered when you turned your back. You were the easy target, the disposable one, the quiet one they believed would never fight back. They smelled weakness because the world trains predators to look for it. And in their minds, you were already bleeding before the hunt even started. You were underestimated, and that was their first mistake. They thought silence meant softness. They thought humility meant fragility. They thought patience meant cowardice. They never realized that silence was calculation, humility was control, and patience was the sharpest form of restraint. They wanted to see you collapse under pressure, but pressure doesn't destroy steel, it forges it. The cruel thing about being cast as prey is that everyone joins in, not because they hate you, not because they even know you, but because weakness is contagious and people fear catching it. They'd rather mock than associate, step on you rather than stand beside you. That's the herd mentality, trample the weak to feel strong. The illusion is that numbers mean power, but numbers only mean desperation. The mob is loud because the mob is terrified of silence. You weren't supposed to survive their mockery. You weren't supposed to survive their betrayals, their whispers, their manipulations. They threw you into the dirt believing you would stay there. But dirt doesn't bury seeds, dirt grows them. And the more they piled on top of you, the deeper your roots reached. That's the truth they never saw. Every insult became fuel. Every betrayal became evidence. Every cut became the scar that would harden you into something they couldn't kill. At first, yes, you staggered. Yes, you felt the sting of humiliation. You questioned yourself. You asked why they treated you like less. You asked why the world seemed built to break you. But pain is not an answer. Pain is a trigger. It is a switch that flips when you've been pushed too far. And when it flipped in you, the victim role they wrote for you was burned out of existence. Understand this, nobody is born prey. People are trained into weakness by lies, by comfort, by dependency. And you were conditioned to believe that suffering was permanent, that rejection meant worthlessness, that cruelty meant you had no power. They wanted you to believe you were born to be prey, but they underestimated the human spirit's ability to mutate under fire. Once hunger enters your veins, once rage enters your lungs, once discipline replaces desperation, prey is no longer prey. Prey becomes predator. This is the part they'll never understand. By underestimating you, they trained you. Every rejection made you sharper. Every insult made you colder. Every failure stripped away illusion. They thought they were breaking you, but they were cutting away weakness you didn't need. That's how monsters are born, not in peace, not in safety, but in the crucible of cruelty. They gave you the flames. You became the fire. The world has a strange rule. The ones cast as victims often evolve into the most dangerous predators. Why? Because they've already been to hell. They've already been torn apart. They've already faced death in silence. When someone survives that, what weapon is left that can kill them? The answer is none. Once you've been broken into pieces and built yourself back up, you stop fearing pain. And a man without fear is a man. Predators can no longer hunt. Your silence is no longer prey. Silence, it is predator silence. It's the calm before the strike. It's the steady breathing of someone who doesn't waste words, someone who doesn't chase attention, someone who doesn't flinch. That silence terrifies them more than screams ever could. Screams are prey. Silence is the predator watching from the shadows, deciding when to move. And here's the education they never taught you. Being underestimated is not a curse, it's an advantage. Predators show their teeth too soon. They roar, they brag, they posture. But prey? Prey learns how to disappear, how to observe, how to wait. And when the prey finally decides to strike, the predator never sees it coming. That's the beauty of transformation. You get to use every second they dismissed you as camouflage, and then you flip the script. The victim role they assigned you is gone forever. You no longer exist in the cage they built. They thought they could define you by their cruelty, but you redefine yourself through their cruelty. You don't belong to their game anymore. You belong to the hunt now. And the terrifying thing is this: the tables don't just turn. They flip so violently that fear shifts sides. They used to smirk when you entered. Now they look over their shoulders. They used to laugh at your silence. Now your silence chokes the air out of the room. They used to call you weak. Now they whisper that something in your eyes has changed. They don't understand it yet, but they feel it. The predator has awakened. This isn't about revenge. Revenge is still tied to them. This is about evolution. You don't rise to prove them wrong. You rise because you cannot be stopped anymore. You rise because survival became instinct, and instinct became hunger, and hunger became domination. The victim they wanted is dead, and in its place stands something they cannot comprehend. You will never be prey again. Once the predator mindset is activated, it cannot be reversed. Pain taught you how to endure. Betrayal taught you who to trust. Silence taught you discipline. Hunger taught you to strike. And all of that added together created something permanent. The victimhood they forced on you has been recycled into power they can never take back. Now the fear belongs to them, not because you chase them, not because you threaten them, but because you no longer play the game they wrote for you. You operate on a level they cannot reach. They know deep down they can't control you anymore. They know deep down you don't need them anymore. And that knowledge eats them alive. They wanted prey. They built a predator, and predators don't explain. Predators don't beg. Predators don't wait for permission. Predators move in silence and strike when it's time. That's the lesson they will never forget, the consequence they can never erase. You were underestimated, but now you are inevitable. Pain is the first thing they gave you. Not love, not loyalty, not honesty. Pain. It was their weapon, their entertainment, their shortcut to keep you small. They thought the sting would humble you. They thought humiliation would bury you. But here's the truth. They never considered pain is a seed. It doesn't stay still. It grows. And when it grows inside someone who refuses to quit, it mutates into hunger. The taste of pain is bitter at first. It burns your throat. It leaves your stomach empty. It makes your hands shake. But keep swallowing it long enough, and it becomes fuel. Pain trains you to survive on nothing. It conditions you to expect nothing. It sharpens your senses because you stop living in illusions. You stop waiting for fair treatment. You stop believing in rescue. Pain doesn't lie. Pain doesn't fake. Pain doesn't sugarcoat. It strips the world down to its bones and says, "Here, this is reality. Take it or stay broken." Most people spit it out. They choke on pain and beg for escape. They run to distractions, to comfort, to fake support systems that keep them soft. They sell themselves out to avoid the taste. But you took it down and let it settle in your system. You allowed the bitterness to carve into your gut until it became hunger. Hunger for respect. Hunger for silence. Hunger for revenge. Hunger for something greater than the victim role they tried to lock you in. Do you know what pain really is? It's proof. Proof that you're still alive, still in the fight, still unbroken. The moment pain hits, you have two choices: surrender or transform. And every second you stayed breathing, every second you refused to collapse, you were transforming, whether you realized it or not. Every insult became a brick. Every rejection became steel. Every betrayal became fire. Slowly, the victim disappeared, and something else started forming. That's the mistake they all make. They think pain destroys. No, pain forges. Pain is the forge where monsters are built. The victim mindset can't exist under constant fire. It either burns away or evolves. And you, standing in the ruins of what they tried to break, evolved. That's the taste of pain, the afterburn of strength. Let me teach you something they'll never admit. Pain rewires the brain. Neuroscience knows it. Psychology knows it. But people ignore it because it's too brutal. Chronic pain builds resilience circuits. It forces adaptation. It trains your nervous system to survive higher stress thresholds. The more pain you endure, the more your tolerance expands. That's why warriors exist. That's why killers walk calmly through fire. That's why predators don't flinch. They ate pain until pain became nothing but fuel. You've tasted it now. You know the flavor. It's permanent. You'll never forget what betrayal tastes like. You'll never forget the sting of disrespect. You'll never forget the silence after they left you bleeding. That memory is carved into you like ink. And that memory is your weapon. Because the next time pain comes, you won't panic. You won't cry. You'll smirk. You'll recognize the taste and say, "I've swallowed worse," and that terrifies them. The ones who gave you pain expected fragility. They expected you to become desperate, clingy, broken. But what happens when fragility is burned away? What happens when desperation turns into obsession? What happens when the victim starts smiling at the pain instead of begging for relief? That's when prey starts looking like a predator. And that's when the roles start shifting. Listen carefully. Pain is not punishment. It's currency. Every ounce of pain you carry is value if you know how to spend it. People who never suffer are broke in spirit. They crumble at the first storm because they have no currency saved. But you've been stacking pain like gold. You've been saving it, banking it, converting it into discipline and focus. That's why you're dangerous now. You've got reserves they can't even imagine. They will tell you pain is unfair. That's a lie. Pain is the most honest teacher you'll ever meet. It doesn't care about excuses. It doesn't care about your comfort. It doesn't care about your plans. It shows up uninvited, kicks the door down, and forces you to adapt. And if you do adapt, you're no longer the same. You can't go back to innocence. You can't go back to softness. Once you've tasted real pain, you're permanently marked. So let them call you bitter. Let them call you cold. Let them call you different. They don't understand. They've never tasted what you've swallowed. They're still fragile, still addicted to comfort, still begging for applause. You've eaten fire, and now you're immune to smoke. The taste of pain is addictive if you let it be, because once you see what it does, once you see how much sharper, harder, colder it makes you, you almost welcome it. You stop fearing it. You stop running from it. You let it in like an old friend and say, "What lesson do you have for me this time?" And that's when pain loses all power over you. It becomes a tool, not a prison. This is where the hunger starts. Hunger for more. Hunger for the next level. Hunger to prove that the victim role was always a lie. Pain gave you the appetite that comfort could never give. And now you'll chase growth the way others chase comfort. You'll hunt discipline the way others hunt approval. You'll crave silence the way others crave applause. Because you know, deep down, that pain is the only diet that builds predators. Remember this, the taste never leaves. You'll carry it forever. But that's not weakness, that's memory. And memory is armor. Every time they thought they were breaking you, they were seasoning you. Every attempt to bury you was just another layer of steel. And now, when they see you again, they'll be forced to face the nightmare they never saw coming. The one they cooked with their own fire. You didn't spit it out. You didn't choke. You swallowed the taste of pain whole. And it changed everything. That is why the victim is dead. That is why the predator is waking. And that is why they should have thought twice before feeding you the very fuel that will now be used against them. There comes a point when the begging ends. A point when your throat is raw from explaining, your mind is drained from defending, and your soul is exhausted from proving your worth to people who never intended to value you in the first place. That's the moment the old version of you dies. The victim dies. The pleaser dies. The man or woman who thought love, loyalty, or fairness could be earned by crawling finally disappears. And in that grave, something else begins to breathe. Begging is humiliation disguised as hope. You think you're asking for understanding, but you're really announcing weakness. You think you're showing vulnerability, but you're really showing dependency. And predators smell dependency like blood in the water. They don't respect it. They consume it. Every time you begged for their recognition, you handed them a weapon. Every explanation, every apology, every desperate attempt to be heard only made them stronger. They fed off your submission while you withered. But now, you've reached the threshold. No more begging. No more explanations. No more chasing ghosts who never intended to see you. The predator doesn't explain. The predator doesn't beg for respect. The predator takes respect in silence. The predator doesn't try to be understood. The predator thrives in being feared, envied, and misunderstood. Once you taste the truth that begging is self-betrayal, you can never return. You learned this the hard way. They ignored you when you cried. They mocked you when you pleaded. They punished you when you opened your heart. That was your classroom. That was the education no book or lecture could give you. Life showed you that weakness isn't forgiven, it's exploited. And once you finally accepted that, you cut the rope that tied you to the illusion of fairness. You severed the leash they held around your throat. That silence you carry now is sharper than any defense you once tried to offer. Begging is rooted in fear. The fear of losing someone. The fear of being alone. The fear of not being enough. But here's the revelation. You already lost them the moment you begged. You were already alone when they disrespected you. You were already more than enough. You just gave them the power to convince you otherwise. When that realization carved itself into your chest, begging became impossible. You can't beg when you've accepted that survival doesn't depend on them. Survival depends on you. You don't ask predators to stop hunting. You become something they can't hunt. You don't ask liars to tell the truth. You learn to live without needing their words. You don't beg traitors to be loyal. You cut them off so they starve in their own dishonor. Every ounce of energy once wasted on begging is now redirected into building, into sharpening, into becoming a creature they can't define anymore. The power of refusal is something no victim understands until they hit the breaking point. The moment you stop giving explanations, the moment you stop defending, you reclaim yourself. You stop existing in their narrative. You start writing your own. And here's the cruel irony. The second you stop begging for them to stay, they panic because the leash broke, because the victim doesn't kneel anymore, because silence is more terrifying than screaming. Understand this. Every please listen was training. Every please understand was a lesson. Every please don't leave was a brick in the fortress you were unknowingly building. Now that fortress is complete, and from inside its walls, you finally see the truth. No one is worth kneeling for. Not friends, not lovers, not family. Respect that requires begging is already fake. Loyalty that requires pleading is already poisoned. Love that demands humiliation is already hate wearing a mask. You are done with the mask. You are done with their stage. You are done with the role of prey. Now you move differently. You don't explain why you left. You don't justify why you cut them off. You don't defend why you stopped answering. You let silence explain for you. You let distance scream the truth they refuse to hear. That is the predator's mindset. Cold, detached, unapologetic. The predator doesn't beg for peace. The predator creates peace by refusing to entertain chaos. The predator doesn't beg for fairness. The predator accepts the world is cruel and sharpens teeth to match it. The predator doesn't beg for love. The predator understands that love without respect is slavery, and slavery is worse than solitude. That shift in mindset is permanent. Once you embrace it, you stop asking, and you start taking. Look at the irony again. They wanted you crawling, but you rose. They wanted you broken, but you hardened. They wanted you silent in defeat, but you became silent in dominance. The roles reversed, not because they changed, but because you did. You chose to stop begging. And that single choice ripped the leash from their hands forever. Begging is finished. That chapter is closed. The victim is gone. Now you stand as someone who doesn't wait for approval. You move in silence, not because you can't speak, but because you don't owe explanations anymore. You live without apology, not because you're cruel, but because you've seen how cruelty thrives on weakness. You embrace solitude, not because you hate connection, but because you refuse dependency. That is the monster they accidentally trained. No more begging, no more weakness, no more living as prey. The world wanted the victim. What it got instead is something it cannot control, cannot break, cannot bend. You don't ask anymore. You don't chase anymore. You don't kneel anymore. From now on, they will learn. Predators are not born. They are created by cruelty, betrayal, and pain. And once born, predators never return to prey. So let them talk, let them accuse, let them twist. Your silence is your answer. Your calm is your weapon. Your refusal to beg is your liberation. That's the lesson they gave you. And it's the lesson that now makes you untouchable. The old you begged. The new you hunts. There comes a point when silence is no longer emptiness. It becomes pressure. It becomes heat. It becomes the quiet forge where you are sharpened into something unrecognizable. They thought leaving you alone, cutting you off, turning their backs on you would leave you hollow. What they didn't realize was that solitude feeds a hunger louder than any crowd. Alone, you stop waiting for rescue. Alone, you stop waiting for applause. Alone, you meet the most dangerous version of yourself. This is the stage where victims die and predators are born. In the shadows, you have no audience to impress, no fake friends to validate you, no distractions to drown out the noise in your head. It's just you and the truth that nobody is coming, the truth that no one gives a damn whether you rise or fall. And in that silence, you either break into dust or you harden into steel. The weak collapse under silence because they can't stand their own company. They suffocate in solitude because it forces them to face the reflection they've been running from. They grab their phones, run to the bar, chase meaningless bodies, beg for attention, anything to avoid being alone. But you stayed. You didn't escape. You sat in the shadows and let the hunger devour you. And slowly, that hunger became strength. Dark truth. Solitude doesn't heal you. It rips you apart first. It strips away the fake smiles, the excuses, the soft illusions. It puts you face to face with your failures, your weaknesses, your fears. That's why most people never survive it. But if you endure it, if you stay in the fire long enough, it changes you. You begin to notice something terrifying. Silence sharpens instincts. The same way predators wait in a brush, still, patient, unreadable. Alone, you start to hear the faintest moves. You start to sense the lies before they're spoken. You see the weakness in others that you once saw in yourself. And here's the education most people will never teach you. Hunger is not the enemy. Hunger is the engine. You don't kill hunger, you weaponize it. In the shadows, hunger grows. Hunger for power, hunger for control, hunger for respect. They thought they starved you by abandoning you. In reality, they fed the beast. Every hour of silence stacked into discipline. Every night of emptiness hardened into resilience. Every unanswered call became another nail in the coffin of the victim you used to be. You didn't waste solitude begging for someone to return. You didn't waste solitude telling yourself comforting lies. You built. You studied. You trained. You obsessed. And in that obsession, you stop being prey. That's how predators are born. Not in the spotlight, not in applause, not in comfort. Predators are built in silence where no one claps, no one helps, and no one sees. They don't need witnesses. Their only witness is hunger, and hunger never lies. Remember this, the world belongs to those who can stand alone. The crowd makes you soft. The noise makes you weak. Dependency kills your edge. But solitude? Solitude sharpens your aura until people flinch when you walk in the room. They can't explain why. They just feel it, the weight of someone who didn't run from the shadows but lived there. The victim is dead in those shadows. That weak version of you, waiting for validation, waiting for mercy, waiting for closure, couldn't survive the hunger. Hunger consumed him. But what came out of the fire wasn't fragile anymore. What came out was something that doesn't beg, doesn't chase, doesn't flinch. That's the predator mindset, not noise, not chaos, not rage. Precision, patience, silent hunger. And here's the irony. While they thought you were fading away, you were growing teeth. While they mocked your silence, you were sharpening claws. While they enjoyed the idea of you being forgotten, you were rewriting yourself in solitude. Now they don't understand why you look different, why you move different, why your eyes don't blink the way they used to. That's because they don't recognize what they created. They wanted prey. They got a predator. The hunger you carry now is not desperation. It's not begging for scraps. It's not chasing acceptance. It's the hunger for dominance, for mastery, for freedom. It's the hunger of someone who knows they can't be broken again because the silence already broke them once and they survived. That hunger makes you untouchable. That hunger makes you dangerous. That hunger makes you inevitable. So let them whisper that you're antisocial. Let them laugh that you're distant. Let them misunderstand why you prefer silence over noise. It doesn't matter. The predator doesn't explain itself to prey. The predator doesn't justify solitude. It simply waits, calm and patient, while hunger grows in the dark. And when the moment comes, when the tables turn, when the hunt begins, that hunger will feed on the same people who once mocked it. You didn't just survive solitude, you claimed it. You mastered it. And now, solitude is no longer empty. It's your territory. It's the ground where you turn weakness into a weapon. It's the place where prey died and the predator was born. The difference between prey and predator is knowledge. Prey lives blind. It reacts. It runs. It hopes. The predator studies, waits, and strikes with precision. That's the lesson they never wanted you to learn. They played their games thinking you would always be beneath them, scrambling to survive. But you've been watching. Every insult, every setup, every lie. You didn't just endure it, you studied it. You learned their rules, their patterns, their manipulations. And once you understand the game, you're no longer trapped in it. You become the one controlling the pieces. They tried to gaslight you. They twisted truth, shifted blame, made you question your reality. At first it burned. At first it disoriented you. But while they thought they were winning, they were teaching you. Gaslighting only works on someone who doubts themselves. Once you see it, it collapses into dust. Now when they try, you don't flinch. You let them speak, you let them perform, and you watch them choke on their own contradictions. That's the predator's advantage, the ability to see the game for what it is and turn it back on the player. Control has always been their favorite weapon. Control of your emotions, control of your choices, control of how others see you. But they made a fatal error. They revealed their techniques in front of you. They showed you how they bait reactions, how they manipulate perception, how they plant seeds of doubt. And now you've stolen their blueprint. They can't shock you with it anymore. They can't blindside you. You know how they move before they move. That makes you dangerous. That makes you the one with the edge. Understand this, predators don't just win by strength. They win by perception. They create illusions, and prey believes them. You believed for a while. You thought they were untouchable. You thought their approval mattered. But illusions break the moment you stop feeding them. That's the point of transformation. When you stop seeing them as gods and start seeing them as flawed performers. Behind the mask, behind the arrogance, behind the manipulation, they're fragile. And once you see fragility, you stop bowing. They recruited people against you, didn't they? They whispered lies, planted doubt, created alliances. It felt like betrayal everywhere you turned. But even that became a lesson. You learned the power of triangulation, how weak minds are weaponized by stronger manipulators. You learned how influence spreads like poison, and now you know how to cure it, not by defending, not by explaining, but by mastering your silence. You don't wrestle pigs in the mud. You let the circus run its course until the crowd grows tired and sees through the act. Observation has become your sharpest weapon. You don't speak first anymore. You don't reveal. You don't rush to defend. You let people talk. You let them expose themselves. You let their patterns unfold. That's the predator mindset. The one who waits sees more than the one who attacks blindly. You are patient now. You are calm now. And calmness is lethal because it unnerves the reckless. They can't read you anymore. They can't predict your moves. That's how the tables start to turn. What they don't understand is that in trying to break you, they gave you education no book could provide. They forced you to learn psychology. They forced you to study manipulation. They forced you to understand power dynamics at their rawest level. You didn't go to school for it. You lived it. You breathed it. And now you can spot a liar by a twitch, a manipulator by a word, a predator by a glance. You don't walk into traps anymore. You dismantle them before they close. Every predator thinks they're original. They think their tricks are unique. But manipulation is predictable once you've seen enough of it. Lies follow patterns. Guilt follows patterns. Control follows patterns. And when you've been prey long enough, you recognize every move. You know when silence is bait, when kindness is a mask, when attention is a chain. They can't hide it anymore. You've outgrown the illusions. The shift is simple but irreversible. You've gone from reacting to studying, from studying to anticipating, from anticipating to controlling. That is the predator mindset. Not blind aggression, not reckless violence, but controlled dominance. You don't rush, you don't panic, you don't flinch, you wait until the moment is yours, and when it is, you don't miss. That's how fear begins to move back toward them. They feel it in the way you no longer respond. They feel it in the way you no longer explain. They feel it in the silence that used to mean weakness, but now means strength. And here's what they never saw coming. You don't need to manipulate anyone. You don't need to play the exact same game. Your power is simpler, sharper. You mastered control of yourself, and that's the ultimate weapon. A predator who controls himself cannot be baited, cannot be broken, cannot be distracted. Their chaos doesn't reach you. Their noise doesn't shake you. You stand calm, and calmness terrifies them. So yes, they thought they cast you as prey. They thought you'd always run, always explain, always prove yourself. But instead, you sat in the shadows and learned. You dissected their tricks. You studied their patterns. You absorbed their tactics. And now you carry their entire playbook inside your head. They can't win against you anymore. Every move they make is one you've already mapped. Every word they speak is one you've already dissected. You are no longer inside their game. You are above it. And once you're above it, the roles switch forever. The hunted becomes the hunter. The victim becomes the predator. The silence that once looked like defeat is now the silence of focus. The eyes that once looked desperate now burn with calculation. And that's what terrifies them the most, because predators can fight prey, but they cannot survive when prey becomes predator. They wanted a victim. They built a student. And that student became something worse than their worst fear. A predator who learned the game from watching them play it. That is why the balance has shifted. That is why they look at you differently now. They know you know. They know their tricks no longer land. They know the game is finished. And here's the closing truth. Predators can kill prey, but they cannot kill predators of their own making. They gave you the education. They handed you the blueprint. They taught you everything you needed without even realizing it. And now, the silence you keep isn't weakness. It's the sound of you holding the knife they gave you, waiting for the moment to flip the table. You don't need revenge. You don't need recognition. You don't need them to admit defeat. The fact that you walk calmly, fully aware of the game they can no longer control, is enough. They created the very mindset that now haunts them. They thought they built a victim, but what they really built is the predator they can never outrun. There comes a point where fear dissolves. It doesn't fade slowly. It snaps like a cord cut in silence. That moment when you stop flinching, stop reacting, stop surrendering your energy, that is the birth of something they never prepared for. The predator isn't born in victory. The predator is born in struggle, in humiliation, in pain, endured without rescue. You learn to smile at the blows because they've already taught you more than comfort ever could. The old self, the compliant, soft, apologetic version, is gone. Dead and buried under the weight of everything they did to you. And in that grave, a new thing rises. Not gentle, not forgiving, not fragile. Something colder, sharper, hungrier. A thing that doesn't plead for understanding but moves in silence, hunting without noise. That is the predator's mindset. You can't beg for power and own it at the same time. You either claim it or you remain prey forever. Predators are not made in comfort. They are made in silence when everyone leaves. They are made in solitude when no one cares. They are made when you realize that empathy was their weapon, guilt was their leash, and your kindness was the open wound they fed on. You decide enough. You decide never again. And once that decision is locked in, you're no longer prey. You're something else, something unrecognizable to them, something they can't manipulate anymore. The predator awakens when you stop explaining, stop defending, stop justifying. Look them in the eye and give them nothing. The absence of reaction terrifies them more than any threat could. You don't argue with liars. You don't dance for clowns. You don't play chess with people who don't even know the rules. The predator is above the game. Control is now yours because you refuse to give it away. Understand this. Every predator was prey once. The difference is they learned the truth. Control of emotions is the final battlefield. You don't need to roar. You don't need to fight every insult. You don't need to announce your strength. You just need to remain calm while they unravel. That calmness isn't peace, it's dominance. It's the control that crushes them. It's the silence that smothers them. That's when the predator emerges. Not loud, not wild, but calculated. Think about it. Prey spends its life reacting. Run here, hide there, freeze when danger comes. A predator doesn't live that way. A predator moves with intention, not desperation. That's the shift. You are no longer running from anything. You are walking toward everything with cold eyes and steady steps. They can feel it in your posture, in your gaze, in the way you no longer stumble when they push. The predator isn't about aggression. It's about control. They wanted to break you because they thought control was theirs to keep. But predators don't ask for control. They take it by refusing to give it away. That's why they fear you now. You stop being predictable. You stop being weak. You stop being easy to use. When they realize they no longer know how to move you, that's when the predator's presence fills the room. That's when the roles reverse. The predator isn't careless. It doesn't lash out randomly. That's weakness disguised as power. The predator studies, waits, moves only when necessary. It knows patience isn't weakness, it's strategy. Prey moves out of panic. Predators move out of certainty. You've learned that the loudest person in the room isn't the strongest, the calmest is. The one who doesn't need to prove anything is the one who owns everything. You've learned their tactics: manipulation, guilt, lies, disrespect. You've cataloged them all, not as wounds anymore, but as lessons. Each tactic is predictable now. Each game they play is transparent. You don't react like prey anymore. You don't collapse under confusion. You smile because you've already studied the script. They're repeating moves you've already mastered, and that knowledge turns their weapons into toys, their cruelty into comedy, their threats into echoes of failure. What terrifies them most is not your strength, but your detachment. Strength can be challenged, detachment cannot. When you stop needing their approval, their validation, their recognition, you cut the cord that kept you chained. That's when you step into predator mode. Because predators need nothing, that's why they cannot be controlled. You no longer starve for attention. You no longer bleed for love. You no longer crawl for forgiveness. You walk away full, unshaken, unbothered. That's what kills them, not rage, but indifference. Now they sense it. They can feel it in your silence. They can see it in your eyes. You don't blink anymore. You don't bend anymore. You don't beg anymore. And that aura makes them nervous because deep down they know once prey becomes predator, there's no going back. Once you learn to stop reacting, you're impossible to use. Once you understand the game, you're impossible to beat. And now, it's not about revenge. It's not about evening the score. That's too small. Predators don't chase rats for sport. They hunt with purpose. You're not here to prove them wrong. You're here to live untouchable. That's why they hate it most. Because when prey becomes predator, the whole ecosystem changes. Their power shrinks, their voice cracks, their control vanishes. This is the turning point. This is where the victim role dies forever. The predator has awakened, and nothing can put it back to sleep. The silence you carry is heavier than their insults. The calm in your eyes is louder than their noise. You don't even need to strike. Your presence alone shifts the balance. They don't see prey anymore. They see something they can't manipulate, can't predict, can't break. The predator isn't an act. It's not a mask you wear when convenient. It's a permanent mindset forged in pain, sharpened in solitude, and solidified in discipline. They wanted the victim, but what they got was the hunter. And hunters don't ask for mercy. Hunters don't explain their existence. Hunters don't wait to be chosen. Hunters move in silence, and when they move, the whole world shifts. This is the awakening. This is the death of fear. This is the point where you stop playing their game and start controlling the board. And from this moment forward, you'll never be prey again. You can't unlearn the lesson. You can't unfeel the transformation. You are predator now. You are silence, control, inevitability. And the ones who thought they could destroy you, they are prey now, even if they don't know it yet. They used to smile when you walked in, not because they respected you, but because they didn't see you as a threat. You were background noise. You were the one expected to take hits quietly. They called it strength when you endured, but it was just convenience for them. They thought they'd locked you into the role of prey. What they never understood is that prey that survives long enough stops running. It studies, it adapts, it evolves, and one day it stops looking like prey at all. That's the moment the shift happens. The room feels it before you even say a word. The air changes, the way you stand, the way you move, the silence in your eyes, it unsettles them. They don't know why, they don't know how, but something inside them whispers, this isn't the same person we used to push around. It's not arrogance, it's not even aggression. It's the calmness of someone who doesn't play defense anymore. Power doesn't announce itself with noise. Power is quiet. Power is the way you no longer flinch when attacked. It's the way you don't scramble to explain yourself. It's the way you stand still while everyone else scrambles to justify their place. That silence cuts deeper than words. They try to provoke you, but you don't react. They try to test you, but you don't move. And in that stillness, they feel smaller. That's the beginning of fear. The predator mindset doesn't come from pretending to be strong. It comes from enduring every form of weakness, every humiliation, every failure, and refusing to die from it. The ones who underestimated you never went through that fire. They were comfortable. They were entitled. They were soft. So when they look at you now, they're looking at someone who has bled, starved, burned, and still stands. That terrifies them because they know they couldn't survive what you did. The shift isn't about revenge. It's about hierarchy. For years they had the higher ground, or at least they thought they did. But power is fragile when it's built on illusion. And once you learn the truth, that you don't need approval, you don't need their validation, you don't need their protection, their entire advantage crumbles. The balance tilts. The predator's teeth don't look so sharp anymore when you realize they've been feeding on your fear, not their own strength. Now watch the reversal unfold. The same people who once spoke loudly around you lower their voices when you walk in. The same ones who mocked you now measure their words carefully. They won't admit it, but they feel the shift in dominance. They sense that the one they treated as expendable now holds something they can't touch. Control. Control of self. Control of reaction. Control of silence. That control bends the entire room. There's an educational truth here most people miss. Real power isn't about domination through force. It's about presence. It's about frame. Whoever sets the emotional tone of a space controls the entire dynamic. Weak men defend themselves endlessly. Strong men define the ground rules without saying a word. That's why the predator mindset is psychological before it's physical. You don't hunt with teeth. You hunt with certainty. And that's exactly what they see in you now. Certainty. Not the uncertainty of prey waiting for the next strike, but the certainty of someone who decides where the strikes land. That certainty is colder than rage. Rage is loud, wild, sloppy. Certainty is calm, quiet, surgical. They don't know what you're planning. They don't know how you'll move. They just know you're not where you used to be, and that uncertainty breeds their fear. When the balance shifts, people reveal themselves. Some grow quiet because they know their games are over. Some try harder to provoke you, desperate to drag you back into the role of prey. Some even attempt to rewrite history, pretending they always respected you. Don't fall for any of it. This is the moment you don't respond, you don't explain, you don't acknowledge. You just keep standing calm and relentless. until the weight of their own weakness crushes them. Understand this, fear doesn't belong to you anymore. Fear belongs to them. You're not running anymore, they are. You're not explaining anymore, they are. You're not doubting yourself anymore, they are. That's the power shift. That's the moment when the tables turn and never turn back. You don't need to announce it. They feel it in their bones. They feel it in the pit of their stomach. And the longer you stay silent, the heavier it gets. The predator mindset is about inevitability. You no longer react to their moves because their moves don't matter. You already know the outcome. You already know their tactics. You already know their weakness. And the cruel joke is this: their weakness is you. The one they underestimated, the one they dismissed, the one they tried to bury. You became the very thing they can't fight. They gave you pain and you turned it into hunger. They gave you rejection and you turned it into focus. They gave you disrespect and you turned it into silence that now suffocates them. Now they look at you differently. The same eyes that once looked down on you now dart away. The same mouths that once laughed at you now stumble for words. The same hands that once pointed at you now shake. They know. They don't say it, but they know. The shift has happened. The fear is theirs now. This is the point of no return. Once prey becomes predator, there is no going back. They can try to pretend you're the same. They can try to pull you into old roles. But those roles don't fit anymore. You don't shrink to make them comfortable. You don't dim your fire so they can shine. You don't bend because they can't stand tall. You stand as you are, and their fear fills the silence. That's the education you never got in schools, in families, in friendships. People will always try to assign you the role of prey if you let them. The escape isn't in begging for better treatment. The escape is in flipping the entire game. You stop reacting, you start defining, you stop chasing, you start choosing. And when you do, the power shift becomes permanent. So remember this moment. Remember the way the air changes when you walk in. Remember the way their eyes shift, the way their words stumble. Remember the way fear flips. Because this is what happens when the victim decides he's done being prey. This is what happens when the predator awakens. And from this point forward, fear doesn't belong to you anymore. Fear belongs to them. The victim is gone. That role was buried the day I stopped waiting for someone to save me. Victims wait. Victims explain. Victims defend themselves in a courtroom they never built, surrounded by judges who never cared. I burned that courtroom down. I tore the label off my chest. I decided if they wanted prey, they would have to watch it evolve into something they couldn't tame. The victim died quietly, and in the silence the predator was born. The predator doesn't apologize. The predator doesn't announce his presence. He doesn't argue. He doesn't explain. He doesn't beg for understanding. He watches. He studies. He calculates. And then he moves. With precision so cold it makes the ones who underestimated him wish they had killed him when they had the chance. This is not rage for the sake of rage. This is focus sharpened to a blade. You see, the predator mindset isn't about violence. It's about clarity. The clarity that no one is coming to save you, that no one will hand you fairness, that no one gives you respect unless you take it. Victims waste their lives screaming for recognition. Predators move in silence until recognition is no longer optional. And that silence is lethal because it unnerves everyone who once thought they had you figured out. Do you know what real hunger feels like? It's not physical. It's not about food, money, or attention. Real hunger is the obsession that grows in the dark when you realize nobody's going to hand you anything. It's the gnawing voice in your skull telling you that the only way forward is through discipline, through cold detachment, through ruthless focus. Victims let that hunger kill them. Predators sharpen it until it kills everything that stands in their way. The predator doesn't flinch under pressure. That's the first lesson. When they insult you, when they doubt you, when they corner you with their games, the victim reacts. The predator waits. The predator holds eye contact until the room shifts, until the accuser feels their own words choke them. That silence is psychological dominance. That's the predator's weapon. Not fists, not noise, but control. When I say I don't play defense anymore, I mean it. Victims spend their lives blocking attacks, trying to shield themselves, trying to survive. The predator rewrites the game. There is no defense, only positioning. There is no begging, only building. There is no explaining, only executing. While others waste energy justifying their existence, the predator invests it in building an existence that cannot be denied. Understand this, the predator mindset is not about destroying everything in sight, it's about becoming untouchable. The true predator doesn't chase, he waits. And everything he needs eventually walks into his line of sight. The world belongs to those who don't rush, who don't panic, who don't react like prey. The world belongs to those who know how to sit in silence until the opportunity reveals itself. What makes the predator terrifying is not aggression, it's inevitability. Victims fight for scraps of approval. Predators build the throne no one thought they could claim. Victims argue over fairness. Predators take what's theirs without asking. Victims defend their names. Predators make their names impossible to erase. The transition from victim to predator is marked by this one realization: you don't need them. They need you. They wanted me to remain fragile, begging for recognition. They wanted me to explain myself, to defend myself, to prove I was worthy. But predators don't need proof. They exist as proof. Every scar is evidence. Every silence is a statement. Every refusal to react is power. I don't need to convince anyone anymore. The weight of my presence is the argument. And this transformation didn't come with applause. It came with isolation, with long nights, with the sound of my own thoughts tearing me apart, until I decided to rebuild them into steel. That's what separates victims from predators. The victim avoids the silence. The predator embraces it. Because in silence, you meet your real self. And your real self doesn't care about opinions, doesn't care about gossip, doesn't care about the petty noise of weaker minds. Now the same people who once laughed hesitate to look me in the eyes. They don't joke anymore. They don't poke. They sense it. The energy shifted. The air feels different when the victim is gone. And that's not about intimidation. That's about aura. Aura is built when you starve long enough to understand that nobody's opinion feeds you, and nobody's doubt stops you. You don't announce this shift. You don't post it. You don't brag about it. That's what victims do. They scream for validation. The predator doesn't scream. He doesn't need to. His silence is enough to make the weak ones fidget. His actions are enough to shut down every doubt. His presence is enough to turn the air heavy. That's the predator's language. Do not misunderstand. Being a predator isn't about cruelty. It's about survival. It's about evolution. It's about refusing to play the role they handed you and writing your own. It's about learning that the world doesn't reward kindness without power. It rewards power first and kindness only after. And the victim never learns this truth because they die begging for kindness in a world that only fears strength. The predator doesn't hate. Hate is still a form of need. Hate is still tethered to the victim's past. The predator is beyond that. He doesn't waste energy on hate because hate distracts. The predator doesn't chase closure because closure is weakness disguised as healing. The predator doesn't need apologies because apologies don't change scars. The predator accepts everything that happened, uses it, and never looks back. I don't wait for justice anymore. Justice is just another word for waiting on people who never cared about fairness. I became the justice. I became the balance. I became the predator who doesn't need laws, approval, or permission. That's why they flinch now. That's why they whisper when I walk past. Because they know the victim is gone forever, and the predator doesn't play their game anymore. So understand this. If you've been prey, if you've been underestimated, if you've been laughed at and disrespected, good. Let them feed you their poison. Let them try to bury you. Let them mistake your silence for weakness. Because one day you'll realize what I did. You don't need to fight for their approval. You need to kill the victim inside you and let the predator rise. And once the predator rises, there's no going back. The world feels different. The air feels sharper. The people who once scared you look smaller. The insults don't cut anymore. The betrayals don't sting anymore. The fear is gone. All that remains is hunger. All that remains is clarity. All that remains is power. I was the victim they wanted. Now I am the predator they fear. And that shift isn't temporary. That shift is forever. They thought fear would be yours forever. They thought the victim role would chain you for life. They thought you would always look over your shoulder, always doubt yourself, always crumble when their shadow appeared. But something shifted, something irreversible. Now the fear belongs to them. Now the weight sits on their chest every time your name comes up, every time your presence is felt, every time they remember the prey they once mocked. The tables turned, and they can't understand how it happened so fast. Fear is not erased, it is transferred. That is what they never expected. When you stop bowing, when you stop reacting, when you walk with calm eyes and no hesitation, they realize the balance was gone. The predator who once fed on your weakness now trembles at the silence of your strength. It isn't noise that makes them nervous, it's quiet. It's the fact that you don't need to prove anything. The man who doesn't scream, doesn't explain, doesn't flinch is the most dangerous one in the room. They cannot admit it out loud, but you can feel it. It's in their hesitation, in their stutter, in the way their voice gets louder when you're near, trying to cover up the truth. You are no longer their victim. You are the walking reminder that their control failed. They wanted a permanent prey, but what they have now is a predator that doesn't blink. That's why they fear you, because you don't fear them anymore. This fear isn't built on violence, it isn't built on chaos, it's built on discipline, on your refusal to play their game. That's what makes it sting. They don't know how to fight someone who doesn't need their approval, their validation, or even their recognition. Their old tricks, manipulation, lies, guilt, bounce off you like dust against steel. They swing, but you don't move. They plot, but you don't bend. And the stillness drives them insane, because the predator they built has nothing left for them to control. Here's the truth they choke on. Predators aren't feared because they talk. Predators are feared because they wait. They observe. They move only when the strike is certain. You have become that predator. You aren't rushing, you aren't begging, you aren't playing defense. You're watching, and they feel the weight of that gaze every second. It's the gaze that says, I see you, I know you, I don't fear you. That is enough to break the strongest mask. You flip the script. You don't chase them anymore. They try to avoid you. They avoid the silence. They avoid the reminder. They avoid the fact that the one they thought they buried now stands taller, sharper, colder. Every step you take without them is a reminder of their failure. Every victory you carve in silence becomes a wound in their pride. And the fear keeps growing because they know deep down they can't undo what they unleashed. This is not about revenge. Revenge is loud. This is about dominance. Dominance is silent. Dominance doesn't need to be announced. Dominance is a presence, an aura, a calm certainty that can't be touched. You've built that through pain, through scars, through endless nights alone. And now they walk into rooms trembling, while you walk in unshaken. Fear now belongs to them because they know you don't play by their rules anymore. They expected you to come crawling back, to seek closure, to ask for understanding, but you walked away with nothing but discipline. That is what terrifies them most, that you don't need them, don't even think of them, don't even carry hate for them. Hate requires energy. You stopped giving them even that. To them, that silence is unbearable. To you, it is freedom. Fear has flipped. They look at you now and see someone they can't reach, someone they can't manipulate, someone who doesn't respond. That unpredictability is lethal. They can't calculate what you'll do because you don't operate in their world anymore. And predators can't fight what they can't predict. That's why they whisper. That's why they lie louder. That's why they try to smear you with more desperation. But the truth is out. They're the weak ones now. The victim role is dead, buried, erased. In its place stands something sharper. You as predator. You as hunter. You as silence turned into dominance. That's why fear shifted. That's why they can't sleep as easily. That's why they can't look you in the eye. Because once prey becomes predator, there's no going back. And here's the lesson for anyone listening. You don't overcome fear by avoiding it. You overcome fear by becoming what they tried to make you fear. You turn pain into focus. You turn rejection into discipline. You turn betrayal into armor. And eventually, you don't just stop fearing them. They start fearing you. Because nothing is more terrifying than someone who no longer plays the victim. Now the fear is theirs to carry. Let them choke on it. Let them sit in the silence. Let them live with the shadow of the predator they created. You don't need revenge. You don't need validation. You don't need to prove a thing. Your existence is the fear. Your silence is the punishment. Your strength is the echo of everything they thought they could destroy. They wanted the victim, but now they wake up to the predator. And predators don't beg. Predators don't flinch. Predators don't ask for permission. They hunt. They move. They dominate. And from this moment on, the fear belongs to them forever. They wanted the victim. They wanted silence, weakness, submission. They wanted a body on the ground, not a threat in the shadows. But here's the punchline they never saw coming. You don't stay a victim when you learn how to feed on pain. You don't remain prey once hunger turns into discipline. The role they cast you in has been burned away. The victim died, and the predator stands in his place. This is the final truth. They can't digest. Predators are not born, they're made. And the cruelest irony is this. The people who tried to bury you were the very ones who sculpted you into something they now cannot destroy. Every insult was a spark. Every rejection was a brick. Every betrayal was a nail driven into the armor they built for you. The monster in front of them is their own blueprint. They assembled it piece by piece without even realizing it. You carry the weight of their fingerprints on every scar, but those scars don't humiliate you. They humiliate them. Because each mark is proof that their attempts to break you became the lessons that shaped you. What they see now is not weakness. It's their reflection sharpened into a blade, and no one escapes their own reflection. They wanted compliance. They got silence. They wanted obedience. They got defiance. They wanted you begging, crying, apologizing. Instead, you erased the part of you that could be broken. That is the horror of what stands in front of them. You don't ask for forgiveness. You don't explain. You don't defend. You move like someone who owes nothing because you don't. A predator doesn't owe prey anything except inevitability. Now the fear belongs to them. The same eyes that once mocked you avoid yours now. The same mouths that once laughed choke on their words when you enter the room. They know what they're looking at. They know they didn't just fail to kill you. They engineered their own nightmare. Here's the education they never wanted to hear. Transformation is irreversible. Once a man learns to survive without approval, he becomes immune to manipulation. Once a man sees that loneliness sharpens him more than crowds, he becomes untouchable. Once a man realizes pain is fuel, there is no cage strong enough to contain him. You don't go back. You don't undo it. You don't soften after walking through fire. You either burn alive or you become the fire. And now you are the fire. Their fear isn't just about you. It's about what you remind them of. You are proof that they lost control. You are proof that their cruelty didn't finish the job. You are proof that they are not gods, only careless architects of their own downfall. Every time they see you, they see their failure breathing in front of them. That's the legacy they cannot escape. You don't even have to chase them. You don't even have to speak. Your existence is enough. The predator hunts without noise. The predator doesn't explain its hunger, it simply takes. You have no need to prove anything, because the very fact that you're standing is the ultimate proof. They failed, and failure has a way of haunting cowards far more than revenge ever could. This is the part they'll never admit out loud. They fear you not because of what you might do, but because of what you already are. You are no longer someone they can toy with. You are no longer someone they can dismiss. You are the consequence of their actions, the result of their cruelty, the living reminder that prey can learn to bite. Predators respect one thing only: power. And now you wear it like a second skin. It's in your silence. It's in your control. It's in the way you no longer bend to anyone's script. They wanted a victim. They created something beyond their understanding. And now, they can't kill it. Because you can't kill what you built with your own hands. That's the warning. That's the inevitability. This isn't a game you can reset. This isn't a story you can rewrite. Once the victim turns predator, the roles don't switch back. The past doesn't heal into weakness again. The monster doesn't step back into the cage willingly. The predator doesn't forget what hunger feels like. And you will never return to being what they wanted. So now they must live with it. Every day, they must live with the monster. They must live with the fear that the tables have turned permanently. They must live with the knowledge that they created the one thing they can't control. Their legacy is not your destruction. Their legacy is your rise. Their legacy is the predator standing where a victim used to be. Understand this. They don't need to fear what you'll do to them. They need to fear what you'll never need from them again. That is real power. Not revenge, not shouting, not fighting, but indifference. They have no hold. They have no leash. They have no relevance. They are prey now, scrambling for a way to undo the irreversible. And irreversible is exactly what you become. They wanted you small, broken, easy to control. Instead, they built something towering, unshakable, impossible to tame. And the cruel joke is this: if they wanted safety, they should have never tried to hurt you. If they wanted control, they should have never tried to humiliate you. If they wanted peace, they should have never created war. Because once you forge a predator out of prey, there is no going back. You didn't just win. You didn't just survive. You became the thing they now run from. And the final truth will echo long after the noise dies down. They wanted the victim. You became the predator. And now they must live with the monster they created forever.